Okay, the time is 5 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. I will start the pledge of allegiance. Please stand for that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will go ahead and open the meeting up for public comment. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes in time. State your name and where you're from. Is there anybody in the room with public comment? Hearing none in the room, is there anybody on Zoom with public comment?
Are you raising your hand, Jeannie? You need to unmute yourself.
Oh,
Okay, I'm sorry. First of all, I want to apologize for not being there. I'm in Florida at the moment. My husband was going to be attending the NCAA women's volleyball alone, and I didn't want him to be by himself, so I did choose to join him. So thank you. The games start tomorrow. The finals are on Sunday, and I will be back. So I apologize for not being there for my last meeting. And if you think, Jenny, that you did not provide me a giveaway, I was at the chamber auction and Fred was lucky enough to win your table. So I do have paraphernalia from the port, so I will cherish it.
Excellent.
So I will cherish it. I will cherish it deeply. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments on Zoom? Okay, we will get right into our agenda items then, starting with administrative items. Let's go ahead and approve October minutes. Have the commissioners had a chance to review the changes that were done to October's minutes? Yes.
Yes.
Is there any discussion on those?
Commissioner Bryan, are you comfortable with the changes that were made in October?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
That was the same question I had.
Nope, I'm happy with it. So if you guys are happy, I'll go ahead and accept the motion to approve October's minutes.
Make a motion to approve October 11th, 2023 minutes.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the October 2023 minutes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, motion passes. Now on to November's minutes. Have the commissioners had a chance to review November's minutes?
Yes, I have.
Yes, I have.
Any questions, comments, or changes?
None for me.
None for me either. So I will accept the motion to approve the November 2023 meeting minutes.
Make a motion
make-
to approve those. Oh, did you already do that?
No.
Was I not paying attention?
No.
I'll make that motion, Jeannie.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the November 2023 minutes. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I,
Okay. We're out of the way. Going on to monthly budget report and approving of vouchers.
Okay, first I'll cover the budget report. So this is not quite a full year. It is a full year of expenses, but not income, because we will still continue to receive rent throughout the month. And also we have a ginormous amount of reimbursements that we will hope to get before the end of the year. We'll see if they all come in.
Okay.
So regarding that, on the voucher sheet, you'll see that there are some, out of the $559,000 in vouchers, $448,000 of it is reimbursable. So Tracy and I have everything as ready as we can. This is the last of the Dayton Community Broadband Project. So we're going to turn in our final report and our final request for reimbursement. It may take some time to get, I'm not sure. The state has to sign off on the prevailing wage paperwork before we may get that from CURB, but we'll see. And then the Tushy Valley Broadband Project, we should be able to get that reimbursement back this month. And then the other big one is the very last Tushy Valley Trail design invoice. So that is reimbursable all except the 20,000 match that we promised. So that's 126,000 that I don't know if I can get it before the end of the year, but we're gonna do our best. So The only thing that I dislike about this is that, the auditor doesn't like it when we end the year in a, small cash balance. I don't think it will be small, but, the auditor doesn't, they don't get that nuance of, well, yeah, we paid it in December, we got reimbursed in January, but it is what it is. So, yeah, and then, we had a few, maintenance issues this month. Nothing too ginormous, but the cost of everything is so big that it makes it look big, so. If you have any questions on any of them, I'm happy to answer it, or on the budget report. We did an overhead door replacement at, I think that was Four-Port Way, and also an HVAC, it had to have a motor replaced in an HVAC unit, so that was Grossi. And we try to take but we're supposed to take turns on our small works roster, so we call the Dayton company as much as we can, but we were supposed to take turns, so
Right.
that was why we hadn't had Grossi for years, so we asked them to come this time. Quality Signs was a repair at the Blue Mountain Station sign. A1 Plumbing was a faucet and a toilet leaking. And then Wawa Electric was one of the inverters was out at the solar panels at Blue Mountain Station, so that took quite a bit of effort for us to figure out how to fix that, but they were able to do it.
Was that 20,000 for the DRS? Is
Yes,
that
that's the
for
back, yes.
Back
yes.
pay for, okay.
We thought it was 16, I think that's what we told you last month.
Yeah, I was like,
But when Tracy got through it, it was $20,000.
What's Blue Mountain Telecommunication, which project? is
That's the Tushy Valley Broadband, that's the guy working out here on the highway, yeah.
that? And WB,
That is, we are almost out of drops for our first project. We only ordered
oh,
half the
right,
town. We're almost out, so there was enough money left in the grant. So we wanted to buy more quick before we're done with the project, so will be reimbursed, but that's more 250-foot, 400-foot, 600-foot drops to serve the houses. So that was a good problem to have because we hooked up a lot of people.
and the Applied Brewing and Malting, is that for the feasibility?
That's for the feasibility study, so about 75% of that is reimbursable.
and my apologies for using an acronym, DRS.
Department of Retirement Systems. We were, for anyone who hasn't been here, we were audited for the first time in my time here, 16 years, and found out that we were supposed to be taking retirement out of very part-time employees' checks, which we didn't know. If you work 70 hours a month, you are by law have to participate in the system. And we had also had a former employee that didn't want to participate in the system and said no. So we said, okay, that also wasn't allowed. So we had to pay the Department of Retirement Systems back for 3 years worth of non-contributions. So don't make that mistake. That would be my advice. If you're a government entity.
Is there any other questions or comments on the budget report or vouchers from the commissioners?
I do not.
Jamie shaking her head now, so I will accept the motion to approve this month's budget report and voucher list.
There's the signer sheet.
I make the motion to accept the vouchers as submitted.
We usually don't do a motion on these, Jeannie, because you're signing them.
Right,
Yeah.
That's what I
It's one of
thought.
those.
my mistake.
That's okay.
No problem.
Okay, next item, 20 or leases.
We have 5 leases
Five
today.
leases.
5 leases. Okay, so first is Cowboy Bullets, Desperado Cowboy Bullets. And it is all of our leases have a renewal option. This is the 2-year renewal option. And so it is for 2 years with an increase of just a little over 3%.
Okay,
Okay. I'll pass that down. Next. I guess I better let you sign. Simple. Okay, and the next one is Blue Mountain Station Co-op. This is also a 2-year renewal or 2-year option renewal in the middle of the lease, also with a 3% increase. That is going to be my repeat, pretty much. Okay, next one is Ray Studio. This is one of the tenants in the Cameron Street Co-working Building. And so this is a 1-year lease, correct? Yeah, this is a 1-year lease, also with a little over a 3% increase. I think we had not given her an increase last year, so thought it was time to do it. Okay, and next is a new lease for the Blue Mountain Station Garden. And this is with the Columbia County Conservation District. They have been interested in it a couple of times over the last few months, and they plan to use it to store, propagate, manage the plants that they use for their conservation projects along the rivers.
Okay.
And this, I have it on the agenda later to talk a little bit more about it, but this may be part of a bigger project they would like to consider. So for now, just renting the garden, most of the same terms as before. And they seem to be prepared to take care of it since I terminated the last one for weed issues. So that's 1 year. Did you do 1 year? Yes, 1 year. Yeah, 1 year. Yeah. Yes, 1 year. Okay. So the last one is a big one. This is Jay's, well, this is formerly Jay's Garage, but Jay has sold the business to one of his employees. So Jay, as of January 1st, it is now Ace Automotive. So this is a 3-year lease, and because it's a little longer, it's almost a 4% increase over the last month. So Jay's been here for little over 9 years, 9.5 years.
At 527, and I was at
Yeah.
521 previous to that.
So he is retiring from the automotive industry
Wow.
after 40-some years.
Right.
And so the person buying it is his employee that's been there for Andres, who's been there for what, 6, 7 years?
Almost 7, yeah.
Yeah. So we're glad that there's a buyer.
Yeah. Excellent.
In continuity, he knows the people, he's, there.
Yeah. And Roger,
Very good, conscientious, dedicated, very intelligent person. He'll do well.
Mhm.
And he's much younger than I. Better looking. Oh, yeah.
Let Ethan James-
But he retired.
A nerd, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't get to retire completely, but he gets to retire from automotive. That's. Anyway, yeah, that's it. So lots of leases. Thank you.
It's exciting because sometimes people retire, especially small communities like this, and you close the doors.
Yeah.
And don't we look at community, the sustainable solutions for those. So I'm glad that we had an opportunity to do some professional development with an individual that wants to take that over and continue that in our community. That's a pretty big deal. So
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And the Small Business Development Center was a huge help. That agency helped. Jill worked with them and worked with Jay and worked with Andres, and they were able to get all the proper paperwork in order and the money, and it was really helpful.
Yeah, great job. And if I got just a minute, thanks to the port for, over the decade I've been here, you've been a good partner, excellent partner. Things that need to be done were fixed, when the heater goes out and things like that. And always top notch. Could recommend doing business with you guys.
Good. Good. Thank you.
Okay. That's it for leases.
Okay. We'll go on to the 2024 meeting schedule.
So we drew this up and we put our June meeting at the Marina as usual. And then I also, you know how I always have that conflict for the executive director seminar in July. So I'm proposing we just move it to Tuesday now. So if it's okay with you guys, then I don't have that WPA.
No, it's good. It's nice to have it on the calendar now.
Yeah.
Right, much advanced possible, so that's good.
So I would appreciate a motion on this one, I think, yeah.
So yeah, we get a motion to approve this meeting schedule.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve this draft meeting schedule. Still on second Wednesdays, except for exception of the Tuesday, July 9th. And then still starting at 5 p.m.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second to adopt the Port Commission meeting schedule for 2024 with regular meetings held on Wednesdays of the month at 5 p.m. with the exception of July 9th, which is a Tuesday. So all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Commissioner Brian, I have a comment or a question.
Yes.
Jenny, does that need to continue via Zoom? Is that a requirement by WPPA?
You mean by the state?
Yes.
I don't think it is anymore, no.
Okay. I don't know if the other commissioners want to consider whether the Zoom is important for the public who attends. We, having sat there through most of the meetings, we have very few people that do attend. I know that most of the newspapers, the periodicals are attending via Zoom. But is it necessary to continue is my question.
I think there's value in it. I think there's value in it, not only that, where we're at down the road, whether or not we're back into a scenario that we were in the last couple of years. Hopefully we do not get to there. But it also allows for commissioners, just like today, with you being in Florida or sometimes the travel, it allows us still to attend those meetings and without missing those as much as possible, as long as you got service where you're at. But I think that it has a value and I would like to maintain keeping that as an option.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Watts. It is valuable having the option to have the hybrid meetings, the Zoom option available, not only for the public or the media, but for the commissioners as well. If something's to come up or if somebody's to be ill, and they can still potentially attend the meeting via Zoom rather than having to miss out on it. So I would like to keep the hybrid option going.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, now realizing that a phone conference call could suffice in its place. I just, I've just never been a fan of Zoom, but that was just my comment. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we still have a motion and a second to approve the meeting schedule for 2024. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, update on port assets.
So we did call the Barkers about potentially working on the entry where the washboards are, and they said they think they can do it. It's not too wet, so they're getting us on the list, I guess. Probably soon.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
gonna come take a drive through and then get us on the list. And it probably will happen in the next couple of weeks, maybe the week after Christmas.
So we'll just do the entry and the lower road is kind of,
Right.
I think it's mostly because we got so much gravel. So they'll grade it and I asked them to roll it.
Mhm.
Because if they don't roll, it gets washboardy
Yeah.
again. So, yeah, so they're gonna do that.
Thank you.
And I think we talked about most of the maintenance items already, so
Right.
there's really nothing else going on in the industrial park that I can think of.
Okay, how about Lions Ferry?
Okay, so I had a meeting with the concessionaires about our annual management plan. We have to plan every fall. And so we discussed projects for the coming year, and they really just hope that the port portion, they'll try to take care of as much maintenance as they can if we can pledge our portion to any projects, you know, the bigger capital projects. So that's kind of the way we've gotten it written up. I also talked with them at length about the facilities plan and what they see as the most urgent needs. And then this is gonna lead into our discussion with the funding agency, but the concessionaires, believe that the pull-throughs are number one to them because of the fact that it generates revenue and they'll let them stay away. And then the C-moorage, the moorage that where the two pieces are put together and it's just so, you know, they have to do a lot to it. And they reminded me, which I had forgotten, that we cannot do the boat launch expansion unless the C-moorage has been changed.
Okay,
So the C-moorage comes before the boat launch and the fuel dock. And then the next one is, this would be the seawall.
mhm,
The breakwater, really, we've done enough maintenance on it that it seems to be doing fine. So that was the order that they had come up with.
okay,
So we met with the RCO today. And that's the Resource Conservation Office that has all the different funding mechanisms. And they believe that, well, he told me we can't apply for any of the in-water work now because we have to get started with the core permits because the permits take so long.
mhm,
So his recommendation for those, that would be the C-moorage, the boat launch, the fuel dock, and seawall, potentially. He says we need to look at it as a long-term thing, which we knew. But they have a planning-only grant that you can get up to $200,000 that will help you get the construction drawings done and the permitting, get started on the permitting.
okay,
So he recommended we apply for that either next year or 2 years later.
mhm,
And then in the meantime, he did say they have a fund that would cover the pull-throughs. That's the Water Access Fund. It does not have a cap, so it can be more than $1 million. It is a 50% match, but we talked to them about Starbuck because Starbuck is considered a I guess like a lower income, what do they call it? Distressed area in the county. And he said that does qualify. So that reduces the match to 30%. And then he also said that the match can be met through other ways than cash with volunteer work, if there were materials donated, skilled and unskilled labor, and then potentially other grants, especially since Starbuck is eligible for CDBG funds. That would be a place we could consider looking for match, although I don't know if state funds could be matched with state funds or not, so I haven't started any of that work. And then, let's see, then the boating facilities program is where the planning grant would come from, and that's a 25% match. And then, then the actual work for the in-water stuff would probably be either boating facilities program or boating infrastructure grants. There's 2 boating programs. But he said the water access one, oh, I know what the other thing was, the concessionaires, I talked about trying to roll in the parking lot repairs with the pull-throughs,
mhm.
because that would be eligible with that. ALEA, whatever it's called, the water access grant. So that was what I found out from them. You have to have a cooperative parks master plan to be eligible for RCO funding. Our port participated with the city, the county, and Starbuck and prepared one in about 2013 or 14. I don't remember the first one. We actually paid some students from Eastern Washington to do the plan. And then we updated it in 2018. So it will be expiring in 2024 and 2025. So there may be some more planning that has to be done, but that's countywide. Because like the golf course just applied for an RCO grant. They just got one for their irrigation system. They wouldn't have been eligible if that plan wasn't done. So that plan may have to be updated. But that might be something that the planning planners at the county and the city can just do in-house, but I haven't talked to them about that either. So anyway, that's where we are on all, oh, and then they found the concessionaires have found they found a restroom. The restroom on this cost sheet was 120,000, and they have some in their KOA, because they have KOA access to stuff.
Right.
And they found a really cute one in here that has, they would get one that has 3 rooms, but it's like this, and so it's 3 different rooms, and in it is the bathroom and the shower. So it's all self-enclosed, and they have one on sale for $41,000 or $42,000 right now, which doesn't do us any good.
Right.
But if not on sale, they're still about $55,000, so it's less than half of the cost of the other,
Mhm.
of the one. And then there was a mistake in the newspaper last week. I want to make sure everybody understands is that the concessionaire said the pull-throughs would generate $100,000 revenue, additional revenue each year, not over 10 years. That was each year. And then the last thing is that the concessionaire said that they would be willing to put some cash in for match if we decide to move forward with it. So just lots of information this month that I wanted to share. So we will continue to, I need to get clarification on that planning grant and just make sure that's all in order, and then we'll decide what to proceed with.
Okay,
But I love the idea of the planning grant too. That makes me feel a lot better about those bigger projects. And those core in-water permits, they said they can take up to 2 years. I have to get a permit to do the upland work, but they don't take that long
Mhm.
because it's not in the water. So. Okay,
Okay, I get there's something to chew on.
yep. And
Have we had a conversation with the Corps on what they can do? Landwires, excavation or those type of stuff for that?
they won't do anything.
They won't do
No,
anything.
that's why they lease it to us for $0. They will do nothing.
Yeah.
Just make us fill out paperwork. And that's it, I think, on the marina.
Okay. How about Blue Mountain Station?
Okay, so the craft malt, I'm expecting the feasibility study. We have a meeting tomorrow, so
Mhm.
I really don't have much to say except I think I told you last month where we were, but we have a meeting tomorrow. The Main Stem Malt has met with the Small Business Development Center and trying to figure out how they could fund the construction of the building, so I'll learn more about that tomorrow.
Okay.
And then, so the Conservation District is interested in potentially constructing a larger greenhouse at Blue Mountain Station in which they would, so right now they have to buy the plants that they use for their projects from other nurseries in the state.
Mhm.
And there's really nothing very close by, so they would like to construct a greenhouse there and become kind of a center for those native plants locally. And I think they said it would create between 5 and 6 jobs. And they would move their offices there into the greenhouse. So we're just still in the discussion phase, but I thought I would mention that. I thought it sounded really interesting, so especially since it creates jobs, so.
Right.
Yeah.
How much space would they be looking for?
They're talking 3 to 4 acres.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so not any details yet on, that for sure, but we've just been talking about trying to get information together so she can figure out how they could fund something, so,
Right.
yeah. So just a heads up that we're talking about that and
Okay,
there may be something more formal coming.
okay.
Jeannie, I have a question.
Okay,
So, would the greenhouse that is existing there, would that be torn down for this larger one, or is it going on the same footprint?
no, it would not be on the same footprint. They're unrelated.
Okay,
No.
very good.
It would
Just
not
wondering.
be.
All right,
No,
thanks.
theirs is definitely focused on the work that these conservation districts do all over the state. It's just a completely different focus.
Okay, very good. I'm excited about that. That garden has needed a caretaker, and I'm quite positive the Conservation District would do a fantastic job monitoring that
Yes.
and leasing it. Thank you.
Yes. Okay,
Okay, we'll move on to the railroad.
So we have Chris Herman here today with us. Chris is someone, I don't know when I met you, probably like the first year I worked here, right? About 16 years ago?
I don't know if it's been that long, but
17.
it definitely was
Close.
focused on the railroad.
Yeah, and so he worked, when I met him, he worked for the Department of Transportation Freight Rail Division. So we had gotten some rail bank grants to work on the railroad. So that's when I first met Chris, and now he works for WPPA and is a transportation expert and has agreed to come and speak to us today about railroads.
Yeah, so thank you, and thank you, I think Commissioner Crowe as well, who I conversed with a little bit at which meeting was it? I'm blanking at the moment where we chatted a little bit about the railroad. So, and I'm aware of certainly the conversations that you all are having as far as interest in evaluating, does the port continue to own the railroad or look at alternatives? So I thought I would just put together a quick presentation to sort of help me walk through the discussion here. And so again, thanks for having me. I am Chris Herman. I do work for you all at your association, the Washington Public Courts Association. I've been there for just over 7 years. I work on advocacy, and yes, transportation is or has been my main focus. I last year took the deputy director role at WPPA, so I'm a little less focused on transportation now and a little bit more broadly focused. But yeah, and we're actually in the transition at the moment to move some of the transportation portfolio off to James Coburn, who just joined us about 6 weeks ago. So my background, I did before joining WPPA, I did run freight rail programs for the state of Washington with WashDOT. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the grant and loan program. I ran that for just under 5 years. I ran the state-owned rail system. We did strategic plans for both of those. The state has a car program that I ran that I think at least you used to
Grain train.
utilize, the grain train. And so I ran that program, and we actually had a refrigerated rail car program back then. The state no longer has that specific program, but yeah, so those are, and I did planning work, worked on several plans, including we worked with WSU on a 2015 short line rail investment strategy. So that was, that's very interesting. And it was really helpful to see, the strategies, for the state, the strategy is to improve rail lines so that they can facilitate 25 mile per hour operations, but then also allow for the heavier axled rail cars. Cars that could carry goods up to 286,000 pounds versus the 268,000. And that's just, it's an efficiency. The class 1 railroads really require that type of equipment these days. And that's actually part of the issue with the grain train program is at that point, none of those cars were built or made to be able to carry the heavier weights. So a little bit about my background. Just a couple things I'm going to walk through, I think a couple of case studies and kind of talk to you about how this is, how the issue of public versus private ownership is seen in other places. I'm going to talk through some of the investment strategies as far as for improving the rail line. Couple slides about both the benefits of public ownership and then benefits of private. If you decide to move forward, I've created a slide here to things to be thinking about for request for proposal, and then some other things to consider. I'm open to taking questions at any point, so feel free to stop me as we go. Yeah, so as I was putting this slide together, I was really struggling to find local really good case studies of local stories. And I know, I think Mall Foster Alongi had provided you all with some material that included a rail line on the west side of the state that was owned by the city of Tacoma, or actually the Tacoma Public Utilities. And that certainly is one example where they've now transferred that ownership to a private line and have actually incorporated some existing businesses that they previously served. And so there's a solid case, I think, to be made for the longevity of that rail line, and it didn't really have many customers on it prior, and now it does, as the line serves the Frederickson. It's a Boeing center, really. It's what in the Puget Sound they call an industrial. It's a industrial zone center within that region. They have, I think, 6 or 7 of those, and Frederickson's one of them. So all the rail-owned businesses receive service now from that private operator who's taken over a part of that line. So most of my case studies are states, probably because states have money to sort of look holistically at the decision-making process that they're having. And there's a couple really interesting models and several that have really begun shifting back to private ownership over the last couple of years. And South Dakota is really a really great example. They ended up after the abandonment of the Milwaukee Road back in the 1980s, ended up owning 760 miles of track, which I think the state only has just under 2,000. So the state owned almost half of the rail system. They have shed that back now to about 147 miles of state ownership. And they've actually sold many of these lines and have actually made a profit on their original investment that the state made. But there's some really key, I think, lessons learned in that process. So the state, first of all, right, so 80s to today, we're talking about, 40-45 years of public ownership. They actually just sold either in 2022 or 2021. They sold one of the last lines, about 170-mile line that essentially runs from close to the capital to Rapid City. And a really key point of that is that really had no rail service when they purchased it. And they now have located 3 grain terminals on that rail line, and have been successful in about 2 or 3 federal programs over that time period. Most of that coming probably within the last 10 years. And so the state retained ownership through those projects, and part of that is they needed to be a sponsor for those to essentially receive those investments from those are federal grants or federal what we call direct appropriations, or we used to be called earmarks. Nobody uses that term anymore. Not appropriate to what the requirements now are, but so that was I think a key piece there. And then again, that line was sold for $13 million in either 22 or 21. And they have consistent rail service. The entity that ended up purchasing the line was not the current operator or the operator at the time of the line. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the decisions that the state made, but when they went out with an RFP, they asked interested entities how much they would continue to invest in the rail each year. They asked about their, financial condition, and a number of things you all may want to consider if you do move forward. Then the second example I want to bring is from my home state, so originally from Wisconsin. Very similar story. The Milwaukee Road didn't actually abandon in Wisconsin, but they did terminate operations on, I think, right around 400 to 450 miles of rail line in the state. The state still has ownership of most of that rail line. So interestingly enough, it's now run by a Class 2 railroad, which is a pretty substantial operation, unlike a Class 3, which is what most short lines are. So you'd think these lines could be self-sufficient. They would have some value to a private operator, but the state has still retained ownership of those lines. And a couple of key takeaways for Wisconsin are Wisconsin has a similar program to Washington that invests in freight rail, a grant and loan program. Wisconsin's program was dedicated to funding projects that brought new business to the state-owned rail lines. So that was a unique feature that maybe in my old job I would have appreciated as I was trying to keep the PCC rail system running, but certainly for ports across the state, having access to to those programs, and I'll highlight those in a minute, has been critical for port districts across the state. So, and then the last case, I didn't write too much information down, but Vermont also has almost half of its rail system is in public ownership. And this is probably the least successful case so far. Two of the lines have very little business on them. One of the lines has a fair amount and a growing amount of business, but it's I think probably incumbent on the industries perhaps that they have in Vermont, that they just haven't been able to generate the same type of the demand and then therefore the need for ongoing investment in those rail lines. So any questions on the case studies? All right. So investment strategies. And so I kind of look at these things in two different ways. So I managed a grant and loan program where I and a team of folks were reviewing applications. And then in subsequent years, we were actually quite successful in getting Senator Cantwell and others to stand up the CRISI program, which is the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Improvement Program, and that has $1.5 million in it annually at this point. And so that's funding that's come through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And so I call this transformative because that's really, I think, a way that I think about, and certainly about your rail line, right, which was gifted to you how many years ago? And just by having that act, it's deemed as not viable, right, as a privately operated rail line. The Union Pacific said, hey, for whatever reason, we would like to keep it, but it doesn't work within our system, and we won't be able to make money on the rail line. And so so I think about, the maintenance component versus a transformative type of investment that needs to be made if and when you would get a new business or a new customer, right, that would need that rail line. And unfortunately, it is a little bit of a circular, or is the duck leading? How does that phrase go? Is the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail? Because you have, the condition that the rail line's in today isn't going to generate sufficient interest from a new shipper, because they're taking significant risk in making an investment to build a facility on a rail line that, has insufficient poundage rail and doesn't, it has a number of ties that need to be replaced. But yet you don't want to make the investment into the rail until you have a customer who warrants that type of an investment. And so And so I think your strategy up to this point has really been to, do modest maintenance. Using, down at the bottom, it's the freight rail investment, or freight rail assistance program is the grant program, has about 7.3 million. That's the program that I managed. It is what's known as overprescribed, which means it gets more applicants than they have funding. And I should say that 7.3 is for every 2 years. That's a biennially funded program. So it's really only about 3.8 million or so annually. But that's the type of program that you have applied and been successful, and how I first came to know the Port of Columbia when I was at DOT is we were making modest, I think, investments in bridge. I think
We did a
yeah.
decent bridge, yeah, because Watco had shut the line down and didn't tell us,
Right.
and it was because the bridges need repair.
Yeah.
Repair.
So I see, programs like that, and then FRIB is the loan program. I don't think you've ever taken advantage of that program. And so those are really geared more towards maintenance, or potentially, did you fund the siding or a
Yep.
spur?
Yep,
Okay,
siding, yep.
yeah,
Mhm.
so,
And then we've done just tie and ballast replacement too on the Walla Walla, the stretch from,
okay,
like between Prescott and Walla Walla, there was a tie and ballast replacement project.
okay.
So it's been hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Seems like it just disappears, but yes.
So again, I see those as sort of like maintenance focused programs, because they're not going to, I think, turn the infrastructure around to a place where, again, you would incentivize, a large business or industry, to come and locate on the line. Now it is important to note those programs are available. Well, the grant is available for public or private entities. So, if you did proceed with conveying the line, that would still be funding that would be available. The loan program is not. That's only the state does not loan money to private companies. So it's actually in the state constitution. So that's funding that's reserved for you. Going back up to the top, the Christie program is one of the only large kind of federal programs that's also available to private enterprise. But nearly every one of those projects needs a public, what's sort of known as a public sponsor. And so in this state, an example is there's a bridge over the body of water between I'm gonna blank. Anyway, it's on the BNSF main line coming out of downtown Seattle. They cross over the canal, and that bridge has received some Christie funding, and the WashDOT was a co-sponsor with BNSF Railway on that application. So otherwise, any other funding that entities in Washington have received from the Christie program WashDOT's been the only other successful applicant. We don't have actually a port district that's yet been successful. Although this program has only been funded, I think, for 3, maybe 4 years total. So it's a pretty new program. Some of these other programs, the RAISE program, which originally was known as the Tiger program when it was first introduced by Senator Murray. That is not available to private companies. It is available to public. Several ports have been successful in getting RAISE funding again. So that has 1.5 billion. Again, that's nationally in that program. And then I just highlighted EDA. I mean, there are a lot of programs. They're fairly prescriptive in nature, and their accessibility is really very I would say very specific to public enterprise. So, and that's, I think probably one of the, you know, I would say if you're keeping score or have a pros and cons column, I would say the ability to access public funding to improve the infrastructure is harder to do certainly as a private enterprise. I just threw a slide together to show some of the benefits of public ownership. Some of these aren't all necessarily relevant to you, but of course, you know, there's key reasons, right, why we keep this infrastructure, and I'm sure why the port made the decision to accept the gift back when you did. You know, it's not lost on me that you look through any sort of the state planning documents, which would be something that you would maybe reference in your comp plan. And this line has potential significant utility if in the event the federal government ever decided to breach the lower Snake River dams. There'll be a big need in this region for non-roadway movement for our ag shippers. And that is certainly something that our association hopes does not happen. And that is our official position, but unfortunately we're sometimes at the whims of others' interests as well. So, but I think that's certainly a key potential future use for the line going forward. Then I just, for a slide as far as privatizing, you know, I think you didn't pay for the line, but there's definitely been investment that's gone into it and management that's gone into the line. And so that is certainly something to be cognizant of and considering as you all think about weighing really the pros and cons of keeping that in public ownership and maybe part of your strategic plan going forward versus you know, having that be part of a return to the private rail system. Yeah, so public ownership does not guarantee that the rail line will remain in operation. I mean, I think that's one, I would say potentially one concern. There have been a number of cases, probably not maybe within the last 10 years or so, but where entities will purchase rail lines and right, the scrap value of the rail line is really where the most value is, and entities will leverage that value for you know, to take on credit or to have credit. And if that's not used to invest back into the rail line, that might be a sort of a concern for folks as you're considering making decisions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. The tax considerations isn't necessarily as big of a deal here. You do pay leasehold tax, which is really a property tax equivalent on the rail lines. A lot of states don't have a tax associated with publicly owned rail lines. And then we have the public utility tax, which I'm guessing the operator probably pays. And then as far as, so going back to the last slide, the local ownership ineligible, there are a couple of federal programs, but those programs again are really designed around the rail line becomes collateral essentially. And of course, in the public ownership space, particularly the federal RIF loan program is probably one of those. And their private entities are eligible for that, but they're essentially saying, hey, if I stop making my payments, the feds take ownership of the rail line. So So if you all decide to continue, considering the proposal, or to convey the rail line to a private operator, just that wanted to walk through a couple of things to consider, as you're doing that. So, a request for proposal, there's a number of ways that, that can be done. And, you know, there's even ways it could be structured where you would be able to consider not moving forward if you don't get you know, maybe 2 or more bids, or, you know, you could essentially set like a floor of sorts on the financial components of the potential transaction. A lot of folks I've seen, so I ran 2 of these. The last one I ran with DOT was actually on the Royal Slope rail line, the Port of Royal Slope. I was still working for WashDOT, but we worked with the Port of Royal Slope to offer that rail line. And there were, we actually managed the RFP process in a 2-step manner. The first was just to engage and identify interested parties. And then the second phase was more structured around the transaction. So a couple of really, I think, important pieces to consider is the financial condition or financial shape of the enterprise. Again, this is as a privately owned railroad, this doesn't generate enough business for it to be independently a going concern. So I think it's important for the port to understand what a little bit around the motivations of who would be interested in buying that, and what the purpose would be, and making sure that they're not going to use it potentially as collateral. That, and yeah, we'll talk about that sort of in my next slide a little bit more deeper. You would want to potentially ask for really a business plan. And so what kind of revenue would the operator be looking or expecting to make on the line? I know the line historically has had a lot of agricultural shipments. I'm not sure the current status of that. And I did see driving in, I saw the hopper cars over in Prescott. So, which was another FRAP grant, funded through a FRAP grant. So, you know, a lot of times especially with lines like this was something we certainly saw on the Royal Slope was, car storage is a significant revenue generator for lines that aren't being operated. And so if that's something that if you're considering this and want to ensure that isn't, maybe you're not lining US 12 with a bunch of rail cars adjacent to the highway, you would want to consider that, understanding if that's part of the business plan going forward. A lot of these operators operate several railroads, either in different cities or different states. And so you can certainly ask about the operations that the operator has elsewhere. How are those going? How are those operations seen in their region or their state? Those are things you could ask about or ask for additional information. What's their track record in attracting new business? This is the purpose, right, of what the railroad is there for, and certainly I would think a motivating purpose for you all considering having a private or returning this to private ownership is making sure that that there is an incentive or intent to move that or get this railroad running trains again, generating business. What kind of partnerships are they developing with ADOs, with their local ports? other economic development organizations that can really help in generating leads, and finding who those clients are. I mean, we're in a unique situation, here, I think, in the state. You know, we have a sustainable aviation fuel, facility proposed for over in Wallula, that could potentially generate, a significant amount of rail traffic. There's different, you know, business opportunities that are popping up, and you know, who's to say that there isn't, you know, something that, this would be a great, you know, sort of a great place for something to develop there. That's the other piece too, is to think about is, and I don't know the status of adjacent property to the right of way itself, but is that something that you would want to, would the port want to maintain or remain ownership of those adjacent, any adjacent, oftentimes it's called like station property or something like that. Or would you be looking to sell, or transfer, that as well? That obviously has, additional, economic, benefit. And then the ability to make, immediate improvements. The example I talked about in South Dakota, they, committed to, I want to say, like a $5 to $10 million investment over like the first 5 years of operations. That's probably not, feasible in your scenario, but they certainly, the state believed that they had, sufficient business, having been developed on that line, to ask for, or at least to validate that, there would be ongoing investment. And then, the capacity to make that long-term investment commitment, is, another, important factor to consider. So, and then I just, a couple of other things I think wanted to chat a little bit or talk to you a little bit about. So, utility and utility easements. Let me step back. So appraisals, and I think you've hired, an entity to consider, the appraisal. There's a number of ways to look at appraisals. Generally speaking, the one that most cases that I've seen is folks are looking at what the scrap value of that rail, really the rail in the rail line is probably the most valuable asset that's out there. And, you know, and then you'll want to make sure that the appraiser's looking at the status of the right of way itself, the property. So some of those would revert to adjacent landowners, but some rail lines were owned outright. Do you know? the
Ours is
status?
owned
Owned, right? Okay.
Yep.
And so the utility component in that as well, and I've been hearing a little bit about that because there are companies out there that will actually help assess and work through potential revenue opportunities for utility easements, and it can be pretty significant. So so that's one thing I think you'll certainly want to think about or consider, especially I think connected to the issue of gifting of public funds and making sure that you're not the auditor's office isn't stepping in and reviewing a transaction like this and they see gaps or holes in the consideration. Clawback options, I would say the port would definitely want to engage. There are railroad specific legal experts, and that may be something if you move forward. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not not an expert on that piece of it, but, there are certainly clawback options that you could put, but it's a purchase and sale agreement. So how you enforce a clawback option in a purchase and sale agreement is different, and you may want to consider if that's something you are interested in, and you want to consider that when as an additional document, perhaps something that's a part of the RFP process that would make that enforceable. Again, this can be complicated in the advent of like a bankruptcy or where the line would be conveyed outside of or really as an entity trying to recuperate an asset that was used as collateral. And one thing that's important to note, I think, on the bankruptcy option is so outside groups can and are doing this nationwide as far as they file to the Surface Transportation Board when a bankruptcy is proposed, and they offer as an organization that they will step in and or take the right of way for interim trail use. And so there's federal statutes on rails and trails, and any, sort of any action that goes before the STB, those groups are watching and looking for those. And we, when I was at the state, one item that percolated just as I was leaving the state was an interest in Pullman to extend the Shipman Trail, which was from Moscow to Pullman, from then Pullman on to Colfax, and that rail line was state-owned. Actually, a trestle had burned in a fire probably 10 or 12 years ago now. And it was, so the line was not operational, and there were folks actually calling for the state to invest and make it a trail or make a decision about what they were going to do with the rail line rather than let it sit there. So, there are, there are many ways that some of the groups that are interested in trail development can pursue, and there's a lot of times there's funding for trail development as well. I skipped over contingent interest obligation. So this was one I just wanted to highlight because you have received grant funding in the past from the state. You'll want to make sure that by receiving those funds, you've committed to maintaining the infrastructure and keeping it as a rail line for so many years. I should remember how long, because I signed those contracts, or I didn't sign those, but I wrote those contracts up. And so you just want to make sure that you could convey that contingent interest obligation moving forward. So I think I guess from my perspective, there's two things I would weigh on you, and I go back to the original purpose of the port and all ports really across the state. You're not the only ones to own rail. There's about 5 or 6 that own rail outright, and the reason ports own these is because it's integral to not only your mission, but it's actually embedded in your comprehensive plan and your comprehensive scheme. And so you want to really think about if that's going to continue to be part of the port's interest going forward. How do you think about the control that you have? So today you own it and you have an operator, but you have significant amount of control over what happens to that right away, how it's used. You've been able to build broadband adjacent to that right away. And not that if you consider returning it to private use, that you give up all of that control, but you definitely need to be very thoughtful, I think, about what that continues to mean for the port and its long-term mission and really the goal of maintaining that rail connection here regionally. But yeah, I think, so just, being thoughtful about, you know, or decisive around, maintaining that control and being able to do, with that important piece of transportation infrastructure. And then what ownership model is really going to, be the best for the future development? I mean, I think the port probably other ways continues to play a significant role. I mean, I think there are certainly ways that the port would be favored in being able to get investments into those, into that rail line easier. And that, I think that goes back to the case studies as far as where we've seen successful transfers from public to private. That investment has taken place, and those lines now are very viable. And the private enterprises are making money on them. So happy to take any questions.
I don't have any right now, thank you.
I have a couple, whenever you're ready. You can go first if you want.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. I took some notes. Is it possible for you to send us these slides?
Sure.
That would be excellent. Because my
So-
notes are kind of messy, I was in a hurry.
So my two questions are, I thought Royal Slope still owned their rail. Because you said
They
you didn't.
do, they do, yes.
Oh, so they did.
Sorry, yeah, and that was an RFP actually to select an operator. So, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
Okay,
good point.
because they've called me. and-
Because we,
yeah.
we built sort of a very similar RFP for that one versus the disposition or transfer, so.
Thing you were talking about, which was, making sure there was a level of investment is contingent in the sale. How do you
Yeah, that's what I,
make sure that's gonna
that's,
happen?
that's the,
That's the
I'm
kicker.
not the expert on,
Okay.
right, you can't build that into a purchase and sale agreement. So there's another accompanying document, I think, that you wanna consider. But yeah, that's not an easy. That's not an easy consideration, but it is a way for you to consider transferring it to private ownership, but still having at least some, some.
Reassurance that it's going to
Right.
be.
Yeah, it just seems like the
Yeah.
enforceability of that would be rather difficult.
Yeah,
And then the bankruptcy, so. I think what tell me if I understand what you were trying to say. So if we had a clawback clause in our sale. So you're saying if the new purchaser mortgaged it, used it as collateral, went bankrupt, we couldn't claw it back. You're saying that mortgager.
I think you'd be in court, right? Because they as the owner or, the new or the entity that you would sell it to, has put it up as collateral. And so I don't know.
We'd not be in
how-
first position.
Yeah, no, right.
Okay.
I mean, I would verify and validate, and maybe there's a way for that to occur,
Okay.
but
Well, the appraiser we hired seems to have some expertise in some of that stuff, so.
Honestly,
You could probably ask him.
entities would be more interested in their money back than they would be into a railroad that they've got to figure out what to do with anyway, so. It might be an option to, still stick with the clawback, be able to get it back, just paying different people.
Oh, like buying it back,
Right.
Okay, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess that also brings up the issue of, making sure that you're confident in the appraisal and, because then, if it appraises for a very different price, it might be difficult. Your report of not great means, so it might put you in a position to not be able to act on that clawback.
And
Can I ask one question from the public?
Go ahead.
Just going up to Willow Lake, I noticed there's, over the years, thousands of vacant cars. You said there was quite a bit of money in parking vacant cars.
Yeah, I mean, so this is something, when I worked for WashDOT, it's the number one call I would get. Is why are there all these rail cars wherever, anywhere across the state? They would call this, they would call this the state rail manager and, ask why that was there. And yeah, on lines like density rail lines like this, that, you know, when there isn't business, it is the really only way to generate meaningful traffic, or meaningful revenue. Depending upon the status of that car, they can be making anything, anywhere from like 10 to 30 or $35 a day. By just having a car, the car sitting there, so.
Jeannie, did you want to ask questions?
Well, no, I just wanted to thank you, Chris, for the time and the information that you've provided this evening. I know you answered all of my questions comprehensively, and I'm hoping that the commission in the future, when they submit the request for the appraisal, they'll take all of those into consideration. I know that I've heard many times the thought that selling the railroad to a private party would be the best way to keep the rail in good operating condition. From what you say, it doesn't appear that the private individual, unless that person has very deep pockets, would have the ability to take advantage of any of the funding that's available from the state or from the federal government. So I think that's something that the commission really needs to take into consideration on whether it's best to sell it to a private party, since they wouldn't have the ability to take advantage of those. But once again, Chris, thank you very much. That was quite comprehensive and something for the commission to take a look at.
Well, is there any other questions or discussion, Johnny?
I don't have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, thank you so much. That was a lot of information to digest. Yeah, if you could send us those slides so we can go over that in further detail, I'd be very grateful.
Would you go back in and unshare your screen?
Oh, sorry.
Hold it up.
Thank you.
Okay. So also along the lines of the railroad, update on the appraisal.
So the appraiser asked to go ahead and have me start gathering information, so I've emailed the rail operators management company, and he's pulling together what, you know, the leases and things like that. That's all part of the consideration, so that started. I mean, I don't think the work, he didn't seem like the work was gonna officially start till next year, but he did ask to start gathering stuff, so we've started on that.
How long is the process for a railroad appraisal? Any idea?
I have no idea. No, I'd have to go back and look at the document he sent me. I don't know if he put any timeline in it or not.
Yeah.
And I did email the rail operator and told him that our policy is to have them pay half, and he said that was fine.
Okay.
So that's it on that one.
Okay. Okay, moving on to broadband, Dayton Community Broadband Project update.
So Dayton Community Broadband is officially done at the end of November. So we can just get our paperwork together. And yeah, last report, we had 574 customers already, or the ISPs do, which is a tremendous number considering it just got done. And we've actually gotten some more notices this week. So that was why we had to order more drops. And we've been getting good reports from people. I love it when I get emails and people tell me how happy they are with their speeds. So that's exciting. So we will, like I said, have to go through the prevailing wage. There are about 5 departments at the state of Washington that have to sign off on the prevailing wage paperwork before we can get our final money. So we'll be working through that for the next probably, I don't know, 6 weeks or so.
Okay.
Is there anything I'm missing on that I should report on? Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would say is that Charter is back here, working on. They hired a private contractor to take down the old TV cable, and so we're getting a lot of calls. There's a lot of confusion because the cable's left dangling and people think it's our project. So we've had conversations with a lot of residents and with the city, and Petricor's advice was for us to start taking pictures and make sure that Pacific Core knows that it's not our crew that is doing this, because we don't want our connection, relationship to be damaged. So, yeah, tainted. I think that's it on that one.
Okay, Tushy Valley Broadband.
So that is coming up nicely, as you can see, if you drive down the highway. We have had quite a few conversations with potential customers along the way. The drops are a lot longer, it's a little bit more complicated to get to their homes because they're so far apart, so. But we've been managing that just fine. And we did get a call from the Public Works Board that the federal government was looking for the potential for a ribbon cutting for a project that they had funded. And I said, well, we just got done having a ribbon cutting. But I told them that they seem really interested in doing one for Tushy Valley Broadband. And I said, we would certainly consider that, but it would not be like the first one. It wouldn't be a big fancy, a celebration with food and mailings and everything else. It would be more just like a traditional ribbon cutting. So I did tell them we would, because we did not have a lot of elected officials that came to the first one. So if we got some elected officials to come, I think that would be good. The state representatives and the federal representatives. So I told them we would consider that. So I think that's it on that one.
Okay. And the rural broadband planning.
So lots of discussion at the state level about the BEAD funding. So I'm still trying to figure it out. And luckily, Kara has called a meeting with our small counties in this corner of the state in January, and we're going to discuss the funding and see if it's possible for us to take advantage of it. The state's making it it's very prescribed, where they're going to allow it and the conditions under which they will allow the funding to be released. So this is, I'm suspecting this is more likely to go to private ISPs, because in some of these really rural areas, we're not gonna have competition. It doesn't make any sense. There's not enough money. It's gonna be one provider. So
Right.
that's kind of what we have to sort out, is how that's gonna look. So I'm still paying attention to it,
Okay,
and that's it.
all right, moving on, community and economic development. Let's have some staff reports.
Okay, I'll go first. And I won't talk about SEDS meeting much, but so I've been continuing with the Walla Walla Regional Tourism meetings, that is gonna wrap up in January. All of us participated in Ladies Night Out this month. It was fun to be out and about in downtown. Did hear from the Realtor and the city that the Dollar General is not going to build here after all. They are saying that the construction costs are too high. And let's see, we've been hearing from businesses that are pleased with our marketing campaign. I'll let Jill talk more about that. And I went to the WPPA annual meeting last week. I had something here I was going to talk about. So I'm the chair of the environmental committee. I don't know what I did with the papers, but I encouraged that. I've been trying to get more Eastern Washington representation on the committee, and try to get issues from Eastern Washington that people are interested in brought before the committee. So we had our committee meeting and discussed small grid, what were those called? Microgrid power sources. That was really interesting. There's mostly has to do with backup power, not powering things all the time, but like I thought about it for the co-location center, where you have this small solar/battery center that can store power and then serve as a backup if your power goes out. So that was interesting. And then we had, at my suggestion, we had a presentation from the Pacific Northwest Waterways Association about Snake River Dam breaching, the potential and kind of what's been happening at the federal level. And then we heard about a new contaminant. I won't be able to tell you the name, but P6PPPD, and it is it's your fault, Jay. It's a preservative used in tires that keeps the rubber together. If they didn't have it, the tires would fall apart. And it has a chemical in it that is, that's, toxic to one kind of fish. So far, but they're studying that, so. Anyway, it was really interesting and the meeting was good and Jill went with me and she had a good time. And I will stop and let her report.
Okay.
Okay, so on the regional tourism effort, I attended the first regional tourism summit in place of Jenny. And that was on vision and scenario planning. There was a lot of group discussion on the future of tourism for the Walla Walla region. There was a lot of good discussions and I feel that it just continue to advocate for this Dayton area and those discussions moving forward. As you know, we were partners with Elevate on the Horizons grant through the Bill Gates Group. Through the month of November, we continued to plan a site visit. So on November 20th, the Bill Gates Group took a bus tour to a lot of different places in the region. And me and Gwen over at the high school really spearheaded that they come here and see. So on the 20th, they actually came down here. This was their first stop. So the Bill Gates Group came and we all had breakfast at Locally Nourished. And I talked about the port's role in the grant. And then we actually went over to the high school and the Bill Gates Group got to see, toured all of Dayton High, saw all the amazing programs that they have over there as far as automotive and welding and all those cool things. We have started that digital social media campaign. There is a packet for you to see the analytics so far for the month of November. We've had great success so far, a lot of new following, new outreach, new likes, and new engagement. The reach is the number of accounts that we have reached. The impressions are people seeing the content, and the engagement is comments, likes, and shares on that. A lot of business interactions through the business spotlights that we've been going to, and really, really good positive feedback from business owners. They really appreciate what we're doing for them, helping them continue to outreach to a wider audience. So we're really excited to just see the pages continue to grow and to continue to kind of tap into the farther regions, Tri-Cities, Lewiston, those places. You also have for your review the survey results from our business survey. We got 35 responses, so a little bit more than in our last meeting. And so based off those results, we are moving forward on a few planning efforts. For business workshops in January, we're doing social media, marketing, February, and accounting / QuickBooks overview class. And in March, a business basics / startup class. They were also gonna start planning networking events, so quarterly, and then have SEDS as the December networking event. And then I'm continuing to start planning the cash mob for beginning in the next year in 2024. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, SEDS meeting review.
So the meeting was the highest attended SEDS meeting we've ever had, 56 people. And it seemed to go really well. I thought the wastewater treatment plant presentation was well received. And then I sent you the voted list. And you can see that housing is the absolute, clear winner.
Right.
So that fits well with what we're considering doing, I guess. It's challenging, but it fits well. So that is really all I had. I just wanted you to see that and let you know that it went well attended.
Okay.
And that's it. And then housing is, yep. So I did have a meeting with the Common Roots Housing Trust. They're really just getting started. We discussed the Blue Mountain Station site and kind of what we've seen from other communities. They said they, at this time, probably only have the capacity to do maybe a few affordable units. And that is if the cost of the land was low or free.
Right.
So, Yeah, well, that's the model. That's one of the models. So I think that probably the best thing to do is I'd like to find a consultant to help us with a plan.
Mhm.
And then, because there are communities that are able to take advantage of those housing trusts, but it's because the private developer is kind of taking the big picture and having that be an element of it, so.
Right.
That's what I would like to do next, and we'll put that at the top of the list for January, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I think we
I
should.
think considering the SEDS results, that's a pretty clear directive, and you guys are already headed that direction, so,
Continue that direction.
okay, all right. I did get one name of somebody that can help, so I'll probably call the Port of Pasco and the Port of Bellingham and see who they used when they did their plans, and then that other one, and maybe send out a RFP or something.
Mhm.
I have to know exactly what I'm asking for though, so I still gotta figure that out. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, that brings us to, at this time, we are going to have executive session, for RCW 42.30.1110, section C. To consider the minimum price at which real estate will be offered for sale or lease when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of decreased price. However, final action, selling or leasing public property shall be taken in a meeting open to the public. So at this time, we will go ahead and have our executive session. We'll go ahead and turn off the Zoom and ask y'all to leave the room for a little bit.
I would
How
say,
long?
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
And there, yeah, probably 10 minutes.
So
So you on Zoom, I'm gonna put you in the waiting room,
we'll let you back in if you want to, in about 10 minutes.
except for
Except for
Jeannie. Jeannie gets to stay.
She gave the thumbs up. Sure.
Yes. And let me stop the recording. Participants. And then, just didn't shut off his, he must have just closed his computer, he says it's still on.
Well, he's in the room again.
See, it was really 10 minutes.
H.
Oops, I guess we gotta get everybody's here that wants to be here, so that brings us to the end of our meeting essentially, other than final public comment period. So this time we will go ahead and open up for final public comment. Same rules apply as the first one. Anybody have any final public comments?
Except to limit 1 minute per person, so.
I figured I'd give them a little bit of generosity. They talked in the first one.
There you have that too.
Go ahead.
If Jerry Kaiser, 117 South Eighth, is my understanding from your press, that it would be better for the port to at least hold on to a portion of the railroad so that you can access the money that the private entity can't in the form of state and federal grants and loans. Is that correct?
That's definitely an advantage of the port maintaining ownership is access
Just
to
a portion
funding.
of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the port, I don't know that it would make sense for the port to sell a portion of it, so, or to maintain a portion of it. I think you would own all of it or none of it. So,
I
Thank you, Jerry.
think that the appraiser said that there is a way to structure it so, or he has seen it in his history where the rail can be sold and the right of way retained, but I'm not exactly sure yet. That's part of what he seemed to think he could discuss with us at some point, but I don't know how.
yeah, probably would be like
Or, yes.
like you would convey the rail, the
Maybe
rights
the
to
rights or
operate.
something,
Yeah.
rather than, yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting to ask
Mhm.
how what value that would have,
Mhm.
right?
Right, it's a,
That-
yeah,
that
it's a
I'm not
much,
sure.
much smaller value than the whole,
Right.
than the whole thing.
Right.
Any other comments? Any other comments on Zoom?
I have, I guess, some parting comments. I just, and the rest of the people were not, or have already left, but I just wanted to out loud and at the port, acknowledge and appreciate all the time and training you provided me, Jenny. I know your time is valuable. And as a very green commissioner, you provided me plenty of time to, with all of the information about the port, and I continue learning so much. I'm in awe of your expertise and the work that you've accomplished in the past and during my tenure. Kudos to you, Jenny. You do a fantastic job. And I know that many in the community and in the state, the WPPA, who feel the same way. The people who attended the lighting ceremony, we heard from Curb and other entities that you've worked with, and they had many praises of the work that you do. So again, I've learned so much about what the port does. And, you know, we were in COVID when I came in, and I was not a grandmother, and that took a lot of my time. And I know that Fred wants to travel, so that's what I'm going to be doing for the near future. But in the future, I may decide again, or I should say not again, but to run for commissioner. I feel that it's so important what you do, you and the staff, let me put it that way. So again, kudos. It's been a pleasure for me to work with all of you. And I know that Jay is not there, but we're going to miss him too. So tell him that Fred and I are going to miss him. So thank you very much. And that's more than a minute. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you. We've loved having you.
Okay, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn. It is 6:44 and we're all done. Thank you, everybody.
Good job.
This-
Thank you, Commissioner, for another year.
Yeah. we made it.
Merry Christmas. We didn't have our tree
Just a-
trays written
yeah,
yet.
it's just a-
We didn't get any yet.
So,
Yeah.
From Frederickson
Yep.
to, well, they had.
Thank you for the water.